The bus rattled through the narrow highway, its windows fogged from breath and November chill. Outside, the world was gray, the kind of gray that felt both honest and unforgiving. A child cried somewhere near the back. Someone coughed twice rhythmically like a metronome of discomfort. My stop was 2 hours away. I stared at my reflection in the glass, 31 years old CEO of a company no one knew existed, heading to a house where everyone thought I was still a failure. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father always said I'd never afford a car, and technically he was right. I owned an empire instead. The bus jolted over a pothole, and the old man beside me grunted. I gave him a polite smile, the kind you offer strangers on public transport. The universal agreement that we're all just passing through. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A notification from Operations All Aircraft, grounded as requested. Aspen Fleet rerouted for standby. I typed a quick acknowledgement and turned the screen face down. No one here needed to see that message. To them, I was just another tired commuter going home for the holidays. Thanksgiving had always been my family's favorite performance. My mother Margaret curated it like a magazine spread, linen napkins folded into perfect triangles, a roasted turkey glistening under chandelier light. My sister Emma was the star of the show. Beautiful, married to a surgeon, and impossibly successful by suburban standards. She drove her white Tesla like it was an extension of her virtue. Then there was me, the practical daughter, the one who took buses and wore the same coat for 5 winters straight. When the bus hissed to a stop at the terminal, I stepped out into the cold. The air smelled of pine and faint exhaust. 2 blocks of walking led me through streets I knew too well, cookie-cutter houses, American flags on porches, everything painfully polished. My parents' home stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, framed by 2 maple trees that had lost all their leaves. The same house they almost lost years ago, though they never knew I'd quietly bought it back for them through a shell company. Mom opened the door before I could knock. "Elena," she said, her smile bright but brittle. "Did the bus run on time? I worry about those schedules." "It was fine, Mom. You know your father still thinks you should let him help you with a car loan. Just something small. A Honda, maybe?" I stepped inside, shrugging off my coat. The smell of roasted turkey filled the air. "Really, Mom? I'm good." "Good." She gave a little laugh that carried more pity than humor. "Honey, you're 31. It's not too late to get stable." Stable. That word again. It had followed me my whole life like a polite insult. Emma was in the living room scrolling through her phone. Her blonde hair caught the light perfectly. She looked up and smiled the way people do when they've already decided they're better than you. "Oh, you made it. Did you have to take 2 buses this time?" "Just one," I said. "How efficient," she murmured, turning back to her screen. Dad appeared from his study, whiskey in hand, his grin wide and unfiltered. "The transit rider returns. Emma, did you show your sister your new car?" Emma laughed softly. "The Range Rover. I might have mentioned it." Dad turned to me. "You should see it, Elena. That's what success looks like." "It's very nice," I said quietly. "Nice, it's $120,000 worth of nice." He chuckled and took a sip of whiskey. "Meanwhile, you're still taking buses." I smiled because silence was easier than defense. I'd spent years perfecting that skill, smiling through their small-minded cruelty. It used to sting, but not anymore. When you've built helicopters and jets from the ground up, someone mocking your bus fare starts to sound like background noise. Dinner preparations filled the next hour. The kitchen buzzed with conversation about cars, property stocks, all the tangible tokens of validation my family worshipped. They thrived on things they could touch and measure. Mom nodded along, eyes gleaming with maternal pride. I stirred cranberry sauce in silence. Cousin Marcus arrived next, followed by Aunt Patricia and Uncle Frank. The driveway grew crowded with shiny sedans and luxury SUVs. I watched from the kitchen window as their reflections glimmered against the fading daylight. They never noticed the irony that every one of those cars, every drop of fuel in their tanks was indirectly touched by my company's infrastructure. When the turkey came out of the oven, Dad raised his glass. "To my family," he said. "To success, and to those still chasing it." His eyes flicked toward me. The table laughed politely. I swallowed my wine. Dinner played out like an old movie I'd seen too many times. Emma bragged about her condo. Marcus bragged about his promotion. Patricia compared spa memberships. Every few minutes, someone would turn to me as if on cue and ask the same polite questions. "So, Elena, are you still working on that little project of yours? The aviation thing, right? Does it pay well?" I answered briefly, vaguely. "It's going fine." That always seemed to disappoint them. Dad leaned back in his chair, swirling his drink. "You know, Elena," I was thinking, "you've always been the dreamer type. Nothing wrong with that. But at some point you have to face reality. You can't ride buses forever." Emma laughed softly. "Maybe she's doing research for her logistics thing." The table chuckled. I checked my watch. 2:17 p.m. Almost time. My phone buzzed in my lap. A message from Captain Rodriguez's fleet approaching coordinates. ETA 90 minutes. I locked the screen. No one noticed. Mom was still talking about Emma's new kitchen renovation when she turned to me and sighed. "You could have that too, sweetie. You're smart. You just need to apply yourself. Find something stable." "There's that word again," I murmured. "What was that?" "Nothing," I said, smiling. They didn't know that while they measured success by square footage, I measured mine by airspace. While they worshipped their garages, I managed fleets that could cross oceans. That while they pitied me, I owned the sky above them. As dessert arrived, Dad poured himself another drink. "You know what I don't understand," he said loudly. "You had every opportunity. Same schools as Emma, same parents. Yet somehow she thrived and you—" He waved a hand vaguely. "You settled." I looked at him calmly. "Maybe we define thriving differently." He laughed. "Oh, come on. You can't even afford a car." I set my fork down gently. "No, I can't," I said. "You're right." He smirked, satisfied with his little victory. What he didn't see was my phone lighting up again, fleet on standby. Weather optimal. Awaiting clearance for arrival. The room filled with laughter, clinking glasses, warm food, and casual arrogance. I sat among them, an invisible guest in my own family, quiet but unshaken. Because this time, I knew something they didn't. By the next afternoon, they would learn exactly who I was. And when the sound of rotors filled that quiet suburban sky, the world they built on mockery would start to crumble, one breathless gasp at a time. The envelope arrived 2 days before Christmas, tucked neatly between utility bills and holiday cards. It was cream-colored, no return address. My name written in my mother's careful cursive, the same script she used for grocery lists and apology notes that never quite said "I'm sorry." I turned it over twice before opening it. Inside a single card, family dinner, Christmas Eve 6 p.m., attendance requested. Not invited. Requested. That word did something to me. It was the difference between welcome and obligation. Between love and formality. Between daughter and duty. For years, my family had hosted their perfect Christmases without me. "You're always so busy," Mom would say, her tone implying I wasn't missing much. But this sudden request felt like something new. I read the card again, tracing the embossed gold border with my thumb. It carried the heavy floral scent of her signature perfume, the scent of nostalgia and control. My phone buzzed before I could set the card down. A message from Emma Mom said, "You got the invite. Dress nice, but keep it simple. Nothing too corporate, okay?" I typed back. Understood. I didn't add that corporate had paid off their mortgage-funded Emma's independent design firm and saved Dad's pension fund when his investment tanked. They didn't know. They never would unless I wanted them to. I placed the card on my desk beside the open laptop. The screen displayed an email chain from my operations team, updates on the new airstrip expansion permits, and maintenance logs for our Gulfstream fleet. My company, Aeronova, has quietly become the backbone of international transport logistics. But to my family, I was still the girl who took the bus. I clicked archive, closed the laptop, and stared out the window. The city stretched beneath me, lit like circuitry, every connection humming with purpose. It was the empire I'd built in silence from a rented studio apartment to a 72-story glass tower. 8 years of work, no applause, no validation, just motion. And now an invitation from the people who had laughed at that motion, asking me to show up quiet, small, contained. Not this time, I murmured. I stood across the room and opened the closet. Inside hung rows of tailored suits, monochrome and precise. My hand brushed past them until I found what I wanted, a navy blue dress, simple, structured, and sharp enough to slice through memory. It had the kind of presence that didn't demand attention, it just commanded it. Christmas Eve came with a snowstorm warning, the kind of weather that makes people reflective. My driver offered to take me to the estate, but I refused. "I'll handle my own arrival," I said. He didn't question it. By 5:45, I was standing outside the Ward's family home. Warm lights glowed through the frosted windows. Laughter floated faintly from inside. I inhaled once, steadying my breath, then pushed the doorbell. Mom opened it, her face lighting up in surprise. "Elena." "You came early. I came on time," I said, gently stepping inside. The house smelled of cinnamon pine and something too sweet to be natural. Dad appeared from the dining room, his expression cautious. "Well, look who decided to show up. We were beginning to think your schedule was too important for us common folk." I smiled. I made time. Emma descended the staircase in a red silk dress, perfect as always. "Oh, you did come. Wonderful. Mom was worried you might, you know." "I know," I said. She laughed softly. "Let's just have a peaceful evening, okay, peaceful?" Another loaded word. The dining table gleamed silverware lined in military precision crystal glasses catching the chandelier's light. Each seat had a name card. Emma sat at Dad's right naturally. Mom at the head. Mine, as usual, was at the far end near the door. We ate in polite silence for the first few minutes. Then the questions began. So Dad started carving his roast carefully. "Still doing that air thing, aviation logistics," I corrected. "Right, sounds fancy. Does it pay the bills yet?" "More than enough." He chuckled. "Well, if you ever need real stability, you know your brother-in-law's firm is always hiring." Emma added, "You'd be great in administration." "You're so organized." I took a sip of wine. "I appreciate the offer." Mom leaned in, her tone soft but deliberate. "Honey, you're 31. You don't want to wake up one day and realize you've been chasing something that doesn't exist." I looked up, meeting her gaze. "It exists." Dad smirked. "Then why haven't we heard about it? Where's this so-called empire of yours?" "Maybe because you weren't listening." Silence. Even the chandelier seemed to dim a little. Emma cleared her throat. "Let's not make this awkward." "Okay, we're here to celebrate." She turned to Dad. "Did you tell her about the new garage?" 3 cars now," he said proudly. "A Tesla, a Benz, and Emma's SUV. You should see it, Elena. Real success right there." I smiled faintly. "I'm happy for you." He leaned back, satisfied. "You should be. Maybe it'll inspire you to get your life in order." My fork hovered above my plate. I could feel every eye on me, waiting for the familiar, quiet surrender. But something inside me shifted. The air felt thinner, sharper, alive. "I don't think stability and success mean the same thing," I said. "You've built a comfortable life. I built a movement." Dad frowned. "Movement doesn't pay for a roof." "It pays for runways," I said softly. He blinked, confused. "Runways." Before I could answer, my phone vibrated on the table. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. Emma sighed. "Really, Elena, work on Christmas Eve?" "Just a moment," I said, reaching for it. The screen lit up Captain Rodriguez. "Fleet confirmed. ETA 10 minutes. I placed the phone face down. "Sorry about that." Dad snorted. "Must be the bus schedule." The table laughed. I didn't. At 6:12 p.m., the faint hum began, barely noticeable over conversation at first. Then louder, rhythmic, the kind of sound that doesn't belong to a neighborhood street. Emma frowned. "What's that noise?" "Probably the neighbors," Mom said quickly. They have one of those snowblowers. But the sound deepened, multiplied. Windows rattled. The table began to hum, the crystal glasses singing a low, deep note of disbelief. I checked my watch. Right on time. Dad stood moving toward the window. What the hell? Outside through the frosted glass, a shadow passed over the house, followed by another and another. The air thrummed. Mom gasped. Elena. What is happening? I rose slowly, my voice steady. That would be my transport team. They've arrived. The room fell silent. Only the low pulsing sound of rotors filled the space. Emma laughed nervously. You're joking. I walked to the window, drew the curtain back, and let them see 3 helicopters descending in perfect formation, landing lights cutting through the snow like gold. The wind whipped across the lawn, scattering pine needles in disbelief. I turned back to them. Dad's face had gone pale. What is this? My company, I said simply. Aeronova. We operate in 16 countries now. Those 3? They're part of the executive fleet. No one spoke. Only the hum outside, the unmistakable voice of truth arriving from the sky. I smiled, calm and quiet. Dinner's over, I said. I think it's time you saw what I've really built. For a long second, no one moved. The sound of rotors thundered outside the house, vibrating through the windows, rattling the fine china that Mom had polished twice before dinner. The chandelier swayed faintly overhead, scattering shards of light across the tablecloth. My father's face went pale, his whiskey glass frozen midair. Mom's hand trembled over the gravy boat, a drop spilling onto her manicured nails. What is that? She whispered. I set my napkin on the table and stood. My team, I said evenly. They've arrived. Emma laughed, a sharp, nervous sound that cracked under its own weight. Oh, please. You can't be serious. That's not your... Her words were swallowed by the roar of engines as the first helicopter passed directly overhead. Every portrait on the dining room wall trembled. Dad stumbled toward the window. This is insane, he muttered. This is some kind of stunt, right? I walked past him, calm, deliberate, every step measured. No stunt, just business. Through the frosted glass, the scene unfolded, 3 matte black helicopters settling onto the snow-dusted lawn blades, slicing the air in perfect synchronization. Searchlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the white expanse like a stage. Crew members in flight uniforms moved with precision, securing perimeter lights, coordinating hand signals, professional and unhurried. Emma pressed closer to the window. No way. Those are military grade. Civilian, I corrected. Sikorsky S-92s. Executive models. They're mine. Mom blinked, her voice small. Yours? I turned to face her. You always told me I should buy a car first. I thought bigger. The silence was so complete it felt alive. Dad's jaw tightened. You're saying you own those? And about 324 more, I said. Plus 42 jets and several airstrips. We handle everything from emergency transport to private contracts. I told you aviation logistics. Emma's laugh died in her throat. You're lying. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang 3 measured tones. Mom was startled. Oh my God. It's fine, I said. They're just checking in. I opened the front door. The winter air rushed in sharp and cold. Standing on the porch was Captain Rodriguez, tall, composed, his uniform immaculate, despite the snow flurries clinging to his shoulders. Ma'am, he said, giving a crisp salute. Fleet secured. All systems are green. We're ready when you are. Thank you, Captain, I replied. Hold position. I'll join you shortly. Yes, ma'am. He turned, issuing quiet orders into his radio. The rhythmic hum of engines softened as systems powered down to standby. When I closed the door and turned back, every eye in the room was on me. The same people who had laughed minutes ago now stared as though seeing a stranger. Mom's voice cracked. Elena, what are you saying? You're telling us you run an airline, not an airline, a transport network. I walked back to the table, my tone steady, almost gentle. We move what others can't. People cargo ideas. Governments, corporations, humanitarian aid. We operate quietly. That's why you've never heard my name. Dad sank into his chair. You expect me to believe this? No, I said softly. I expect you to see it. Outside, the snow continued to fall, catching in the light from the landing pads. It was almost beautiful, the contrast of calm flakes drifting through the glow of mechanical precision. Emma found her voice again. You can't just show up with helicopters like some movie characters. This isn't real. It's as real as your Range Rover, I said. Just louder. She flushed. You've been lying to us. All these years pretending to be what some poor minimalist I wasn't pretending. I just stopped explaining myself. Dad slammed his palm on the table. You could have told us, I tried, I said, meeting his eyes. You told me to be realistic, to get a car, to find stability, to stop dreaming. So I built a reality so big you couldn't see it. Mom's lip quivered. All those times we offered to help, I didn't need help, I interrupted. I needed belief. The words hung between us, sharp and quiet. Outside, a light tap on the window drew our attention. A crew member motioned to me, thumbs up ready. I nodded once. What are they doing? Emma whispered. Waiting for orders. Orders? Dad repeated, his voice faint. You're giving orders. I checked my watch. Always. For a moment, no one spoke. Only the faint vibration of engines filled the distance between our disbelief and their reality. Then Marcus, my cousin, who'd been filming on his phone the entire time, let out a low whistle. Holy hell! She's not bluffing. I turned to him. Marcus, stop recording. He lowered the phone instantly. Right. Sorry. Mom stood abruptly. You're not flying anywhere tonight. It's Christmas Eve, for God's sake. You're staying here. I smiled. I didn't come to fly. I came to land. She looked confused. Land. To let the truth touch down, I said quietly. To stop hiding. Dad rubbed his temples, muttering, I don't even know who you are anymore. You don't have to, I said. You just have to stop underestimating me. Emma crossed her arms. So what now? You think this spectacle makes you better than us? No, I said. It just makes me visible. For the first time in years, I saw their faces without the filter of pity or condescension. They weren't superior anymore, just small, confused human. I walked to the window again, watching my fleet rest on the lawn like sleeping giants. They say you can't go home again, I murmured. Maybe they're right. Because sometimes the home you return to is too small for who you've become. The lights flickered once as the power fluctuated, something about the electromagnetic field from the rotors probably. The chandelier dimmed to a soft golden hue, casting the room in a halo of almost sacred disbelief. Dad finally exhaled a sound halfway between surrender and awe. $2 billion, he said quietly. You built a $2 billion empire and took the bus. I met his eyes. Because I could. No one laughed this time. Outside, Captain Rodriguez lifted his hand in a small, respectful wave before turning toward the fleet. The hum began again, steady, powerful, alive. Then I walked to the front door, opened it to the cold air, and let the sound of the sky swallow the silence behind me. The cold hit me like a baptism, the kind that shocks the body, but clears the mind. Snow swirled in ribbons across the front lawn, the air vibrating with the hum of power. 3 black helicopters rested in perfect formation, their landing lights cutting through the winter fog. My boots crunched against the ice as I stepped forward, my breath a visible trail in the freezing night. Behind me, the front door opened. Elena. Dad shouted, his voice trembling between fury and disbelief. Get back inside before you freeze to death. I turned slightly. I'm fine, Dad. He hovered on the porch, gripping the railing, like a man unsure if the ground would hold. Mom stood behind him, clutching her cardigan. Emma appeared next, arms crossed, still in denial. I felt no cold at that moment. My pulse matched the rotor blade's roar, powerful and unshaken. The lights from the helicopters shone directly on me. It wasn't a spotlight, but a mirror. A mirror reflecting the truth I had built in silence. Captain Rodriguez approached, his expression professional, but warm. Ma'am, perimeter secured. We can begin the demonstration on your signal. Thank you, Captain, I said. Let's keep it simple. I think visibility is all the demonstration we need. He nodded once and spoke into his radio. The pilots responded immediately, their synchronized movements, almost balletic rotors, turning slowly, engines rising from a low hum to a full-bodied roar that filled the world. The snow lifted into the air like silver dust. Mom gasped. They're so close. They'll ruin the yard. Don't worry, I said quietly. It's insured. Emma stepped off the porch, covering her ears. You're insane. This is insane. You can't just land aircraft in a neighborhood. Actually, I said I can. I own the property and the neighboring lots. I acquired them 2 years ago for expansion testing. Her jaw dropped. You what? Dad looked at me sharply. You bought our neighbors' houses? Technically, a subsidiary did. I glanced at the nearest helicopter, its lights reflecting off my coat. Transglobe Infrastructure Holdings. We used the land for prototype landings and cargo tests. The wind whipped harder as the second helicopter powered up. My hair tangled in the current. The noise was deafening, beautiful, alive. For years I dreamed of this sound, the heartbeat of the sky itself. Rodriguez signaled again. The fleet lifted 2 feet off the ground, hovering in perfect symmetry, their blades carving through the snowfall like dancers in midair. Dad stumbled down the steps, shielding his eyes. How is this possible? I smiled. You told me to get my head out of the clouds. I just made them my business. Mom's hand went to her chest. I don't understand any of this. You don't have to, I said softly. You just have to believe it's real. Rodriguez approached me again, voice raised over the thunder. Would you like me to power down for safety, ma'am? Affirmative, I said. Within seconds, the engines wound down the blades, slowing until the only sound left was the winter wind. The snow began to fall again, settling over the dark metal. Emma stood beside Dad, her voice small now. You actually run this? Yes, I said. I started 8 years ago with one leased helicopter and a belief that I could fix what others ignored. Dad's eyes narrowed. Fix what? Time, I said. Distance. Possibility. The way people move through the world. I built a network that connects what's broken. Mom stepped forward, tears glistening in her eyes. Why didn't you tell us? Because you wouldn't have believed me. She didn't argue. She didn't have to. Her silence was the confession. The front door creaked again. Uncle Frank and Aunt Patricia stepped out, their faces pale, awed, drawn by the noise. Good Lord, Frank murmured. Is this some kind of government thing? No, I said simply. It's mine. He gave a low whistle. You always were the quiet one. Guess we should have listened closer. The snow thickened, catching in the floodlights, turning the moment surreal. Rodriguez stood by the lead helicopter, waiting for further instruction. I lifted a hand, motioning him closer. Captain, would you mind showing them the interior? Of course, ma'am. He opened the door to the nearest aircraft, revealing a sleek interior of cream leather and chrome, the Aeronova insignia stitched into the headrests. The warmth from inside spilled into the cold, tinted by the soft hum of onboard systems. Emma stepped closer, unable to hide her curiosity. It looks like a hotel suite. It's an executive transport, Rodriguez explained politely. We service government leaders, CEOs, and emergency medical teams. Each aircraft is equipped for long-range, low-noise travel. He turned to me. This unit just returned from Tokyo yesterday, ma'am. Thank you, Captain. I looked at my father. Still think I should have bought that Honda. He didn't answer. His eyes were glassy, his pride collapsing under the weight of realization. Mom whispered, You've been flying all this time. Yes, and we mocked you. I looked at her gently. You did what you knew. So did I. Rodriguez closed the helicopter door and saluted once more. Fleet ready for standby, ma'am. The weather's turning. I recommend takeoff within 20 minutes if we plan to reposition. Understood, I said. Stand down for now. I'll finish here. He nodded, motioned to his crew, and they dispersed into the falling snow, efficient as ever. I turned back to my family. The light from the landing pads glowed across their faces. Dad's disbelief, Mom's regret, Emma's fragile ego fracturing in real time. This wasn't about showing off, I said. It was about showing you the truth. You thought stability meant staying still. I learned that real stability comes from motion, constant, intentional forward. Mom's tears fell freely now. We just wanted you to be safe. I am, I said softly. Safer than I've ever been. The wind carried her sob like a confession into the night. Behind us, the sound of engines flared once more as the fleet began warming for departure. The snow lifted again, swirling around us in chaotic beauty. Emma's voice cracked. You're leaving, yes, I said. For now. Where Dad asked hoarsely. Wherever the sky calls next. I paused, watching their faces, memorizing the moment, the disbelief, the humility, the fragile awe. Then I turned toward Rodriguez, who was waiting near the lead helicopter. Ready the cabin, I said. I'll join you shortly. He saluted and disappeared into the machine. As the rotors spun faster, I looked back one last time at my family, at the people who had measured my worth in vehicles and status, now standing small beneath the shadow of my wings. I smiled faintly. Merry Christmas, I said. Then I stepped into the light of the landing zone, the sound of the engines rising around me like a hymn. The sky opened wide, and I walked toward it without hesitation. The snowstorm followed me north, a ribbon of white chasing the fleet as we cut through the night. From the cockpit, the world below looked small towns like tiny constellations scattered across a black canvas. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the headset, calm as always. Altitude steady at 6,000 feet, ma'am. Estimated arrival in 40 minutes. Copy that, I said, my gaze fixed on the horizon. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, steady and hypnotic. I should have felt triumphant, but the silence after revelation carried its own kind of weight. The truth was out. The lie of their pity had collapsed. Yet victory didn't taste like I'd imagined it tasted, clean cold and strangely lonely. The moonlight spilled across the leather seats. The faint reflection of my face in the cabin window, almost unrecognizable. For a long time, that face had worn other people's definitions. Failure, dreamer, disappointment. Now it was mine again. Rodriguez turned slightly in his seat. If I may, ma'am, quite the scene back there. I smiled faintly. They thought I'd lost my mind. Then you showed them their reflection, he said. I leaned back, closing my eyes. That's the thing about mirrors, they always break before they show the truth. He didn't reply, just nodded once and returned to the controls. The aircraft sliced through a patch of turbulence, the vibrations subtle but grounding. I preferred it that way. Perfection was sterile. Movement reminded me I was alive. The onboard comms crackled. Fleet 2 reporting smooth trajectory, ma'am. ETA identical. Confirmed, Rodriguez replied. I switched my radio on. Captain Chen, after landing, proceeded to the maintenance base Alpha. Have the engineering team run full diagnostics. We'll reposition to the hangar tomorrow. Understood, ma'am. I turned the radio off and stared out into the dark. Somewhere far below, the lights of my parents' house were fading into memory. Maybe they were still standing in the snow trying to make sense of what they'd just seen. Maybe they were still laughing nervously, pretending it hadn't happened. Or maybe for the first time in their lives, they were quiet. Rodriguez glanced back again. Permission to ask something personal. Granted. Was it worth it? I looked at him. Which part? All of it. The hiding, the silence, the reveal. I thought for a moment. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about reminding myself I was right. He nodded thoughtfully. You built something rare, ma'am. Most people chase validation. You built velocity. That's what they never understood, I said softly. Success was never about stillness for me. It was about motion, constant, deliberate motion. The headset went quiet again. Outside, the sky opened, wider stars flickering through thin clouds. I remembered the first night I'd dreamed of flying, not metaphorically, but literally. I'd been 12, sitting on the roof of our old house, watching planes cross the horizon. Dad had called me down, yelling that I'd catch pneumonia. I didn't move. Even then, I'd known I was meant to live above the noise. The aircraft banked left and city lights appeared in the distance. Denver. My city. My empire's quiet heartbeat. "Captain," I said. "Divert us to Hangar 12 at Centennial." "Copy that." The radio clicked again, another pilot checking in. "Fleet 3 in formation. Ma'am, congratulations on the display tonight." "The crew's still talking about it." "Appreciate it," I said. "Remind them precision isn't spectacle. It's respect for the craft." "Yes, ma'am." I smiled to myself. Respect that was the foundation of everything I'd built. Machines respected rules. Humans respected fear. I learned to balance both. When the city drew closer, I could see the faint glow of the Aeronova headquarters, the company name barely visible against the skyline by design. It was never about brand recognition. It was about presence, the kind of influence that didn't need to shout. Rodriguez began the descent checklist. Permission to initiate the final approach, granted. He lowered the landing gear and the hum deepened. The other two helicopters mirrored our movements, perfectly synchronized. Through the side window, I saw their navigation lights blinking red and white like heartbeat monitors in the dark. "Welcome home," Rodriguez said quietly as we touched down. The rotors slowed, snow swirling into spirals around us. The hangar doors opened automatically, a wash of warm light spilling out. Inside, my ground crew, weighted technicians, engineers, operations staff, all dressed in black flight suits, standing at attention as the fleet rolled in. I unbuckled my harness and stepped out into the crisp air. The ground beneath me vibrated faintly as the other aircraft landed beside us. "Ma'am," said Chief Engineer Patel, approaching with a tablet in hand. "All systems are nominal. Fuel reserves at 80%. Maintenance checks scheduled for tomorrow at 0800. "Thank you," I said. "Take the crew off duty after debriefing. Double holiday pay," he grinned. "They'll appreciate that, ma'am." Rodriguez joined me at my side, his eyes scanning the hangar. "Every time we come back here, it feels less like a base and more like a cathedral." I looked around the high ceilings, the hum of machines cooling down, the faint echo of footsteps. "Maybe that's what it is," I said. "A place where motion meets faith." He nodded, thoughtful. "Will you be going home tonight?" "No," I said. "Home isn't ready for me yet." I crossed the hangar to my office suite, a glass-enclosed mezzanine overlooking the fleet. The interior lights flicked on automatically. My desk was clean, except for a single object in the center, a small wooden model of a helicopter, hand-carved, unfinished. A gift from my father when I was 13. Back then it had been a symbol of his mockery. Now it was a reminder of how far I'd flown past it. I traced the rough edges with my fingers. The wood was cold, imperfect. So was I once. The door behind me slid open softly. Rodriguez stood there, cap in hand. "We'll keep the fleet on standby through the night, ma'am. You never know when the sky might call." I smiled. "That's the thing, Captain. It always does." He gave a slight nod, then disappeared into the hangar below. I sat at my desk, turned off the lights, and let the city glow through the glass. Below me, the helicopters gleamed under spotlights, perfectly aligned, silent and waiting. From this height, the world looked small again, but not insignificant. Just manageable. I closed my eyes, listening to the faint echo of engines fading into stillness. For the first time that night, I allowed myself to feel it relief, not triumph. Because power wasn't the point anymore. Freedom was. And tonight, the sky finally felt like home. The next morning began without sound. The snow outside the hangar had settled overnight, blanketing the runways in soft white silence. For the first time in months, there were no meetings, no calls, no directives waiting in my inbox. Only quiet and the faint hum of the world catching up to what had happened last night. By sunrise, Aeronova's internal channels were buzzing. Someone from the flight crew must have said something to a journalist, or maybe a neighbor caught footage of the landing. Either way, the secret that had lived in the dark for 8 years was starting to breathe in the light. I sipped my coffee and stared at the glowing skyline through the office window. From up here, the city looked peaceful, unaware of the storm about to hit. Rodriguez entered without knocking. "Morning, ma'am." "Morning, Captain." He placed a tablet on my desk. Media chatter started around 3 a.m. 2 videos already hit social platforms, one from your cousin, another from a local drone operator. Both show the fleet landing on your parents' lawn. I raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Hashtag Christmas miracle. Rich girl revenge," he said. "It's trending number 3 globally." I couldn't help but laugh softly. "Of course it is." He hesitated. "Are you upset?" I shook my head, the smile fading. Not upset, just disappointed. For 8 years, I built complexity, control, and silence. And in one night, they reduced it to a simple story: revenge. They never understood that flying wasn't about putting anyone down. It was about freeing myself from the ground. I scrolled past the noise. "They're making a story out of a moment," I said. "Let them. The world loves its myths until the myth becomes the new reality." Rodriguez shifted his stance. "Do you want me to issue a statement? No. Silence says more." He nodded, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of worry. "Some of the board might not like that approach." "They'll adapt," I said. "They always do when profits rise." He smiled faintly. "Yes, ma'am." When he left, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. The hangar below shimmered under the fluorescent light, sleek aircraft lined in perfect symmetry, every machine a reflection of a decision I made alone. For years I had built in shadows. Now the world wanted to drag that light into spectacle. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in a long time. "Hello?" My mother's voice was small, hesitant. "Hi, Mom." There was a pause long enough to feel hesitant. "Elena, are you all right?" "I don't know," she said. "There were reporters outside this morning. Neighbors asking questions. Your father hasn't stopped pacing." "I'm sorry about that," I said quietly. "It wasn't supposed to get out." "Well, it did," she said, voice trembling. "They're saying you're some kind of billionaire. Is that true?" "Yes." The word hung there unadorned. "I just don't understand," she whispered. "How could you build something like that without telling us?" I closed my eyes. "Because I tried to tell you when it was small. You laughed when I said I wanted to build aircraft. You told me to be practical. I just wanted you to be safe," she said. "I know. But safety isn't the same as living." On the other end of the line, I could hear the faint hum of the old house, the same kitchen clock ticking, the same window creaking when the wind hit it. It felt like a lifetime away. "I saw the helicopters," she said finally. "They were beautiful. They were necessary," I said softly. She hesitated again. "Your father wants to speak with you, but give him time. He's proud, you know." "I know," I said. "Tell him I'm okay. That's all that matters." We said goodbye, and the call ended with the quiet click of understanding that was 8 years too late. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the hangar doors opened and engineers began their morning routines. The fleet gleamed under the light, no longer hidden. The intercom buzzed. "Ma'am, the board is requesting an emergency meeting at 9. "Set it up," I said. By 9 sharp, the conference room was full. 12 people, 12 different fears masked as concern. Ms. Ward began. Julian Pierce, head of finance, his voice oily smooth. "We've received multiple press inquiries. Investors are curious about your unplanned public appearance last night." "Curious?" I repeated. "That's one word for it." He cleared his throat. "With respect, ma'am, we've operated on anonymity for a reason. Public exposure could affect our contracts, especially the government ones." I leaned forward. "Julian, are any of those contracts at risk right now?" "No," he admitted. "But perception," I interrupted, "changes nothing. If results stay constant, we deliver. Always. Let the world talk." There was a murmur around the table. Half of them looked relieved, the other half terrified. Jonas, my COO, finally spoke. "You did what most people dream of doing, Elena. You turned mockery into an empire. But the spotlight burns even when you don't ask for it." I met his gaze. Then we'll learn to glow without catching fire. The room went silent again. Then slowly the nods began. Meeting adjourned. By the time I stepped out, the snow had stopped. The air smelled new, like something just beginning. Rodriguez was waiting near the corridor, tablet in hand. Fleet standing by, ma'am. Where to next? I smiled. Nowhere yet. Let them talk. He nodded, then paused. Permission to say something off record. Go ahead. What you did last night, it wasn't revenge. It was evolution. I looked out through the glass wall at the horizon. Maybe. But sometimes evolution looks a lot like revenge before it softens into grace. He said nothing more. As he walked away, I pressed a hand against the window. The city below pulsed with movement life questions. Somewhere out there, people were writing my story for me, shaping it into headlines and theories. They didn't understand. They never would. Because this wasn't about money or status or even power. It was about silence and how I'd turned it into flight. By the third day, the media noise had reached a fever pitch. Every headline, every thumbnail, every breathless podcast host wanted a piece of the story. The billionaire who took the bus. One read. Another called me the Queen of Quiet Power. I couldn't decide which was more absurd. Inside Aeronova's tower, the noise was just static on glass. I'd learned long ago that the world doesn't see you. It projects you. And right now, it was projecting a myth, the daughter who humiliated her family, the genius who built a secret empire, the woman who avenged herself without raising her voice. But I knew the truth. This wasn't vengeance. It was equilibrium. Rodriguez entered my office mid-morning holding a folder. Ma'am, these came in from our PR monitoring team. Coverage reactions and a few invitations. Invitations, I asked without looking up. He smirked. Everyone wants a piece of you now. A tech summit in London, a leadership panel in DC, an interview with Forbes. They're calling it The Flight of the Invisible CEO. I exhaled through a faint smile. 8 years of invisibility, and now they want to make me their symbol. He hesitated. Do you want me to decline them all? Not yet. Let's see which ones are of real interest and which ones just smell blood. He nodded and turned to leave, but paused at the door. Ma'am, your parents reached out again. They've requested a meeting. I looked up from the screen. Through an intermediary, a family friend. They said they just want to talk privately. For a moment I said nothing. The air between us felt sharp. Set it up, I said finally. But not at their house. Not where I was erased. Understood. When he left, I stared at the skyline, the city's pulse reflected in the window. Every light out there was a story, a life moving forward. And yet somehow mine had become entertainment. By noon, the meeting was arranged neutral ground, a small cafe near the river. I arrived first, dressed in a dark coat and no makeup, anonymity wrapping me like armor. I chose a corner table facing the window. 10 minutes later, they walked in. My mother first hesitant, her posture stiff. My father followed, not with anger this time, but with the awkward dignity of someone who didn't know which mask to wear. Elena, Mom said softly. I stood. Mom. Dad. We sat. The air felt brittle like glass about to crack. For a while, no one spoke. Then Dad cleared his throat. You look different. I am, I said simply. He nodded, his eyes darting to the window. You embarrassed us. The words hit, but not like they used to. You embarrassed yourselves, I said quietly. You mocked me for years, and when I finally stopped explaining myself, you assumed I'd failed. Mom reached across the table. We didn't know. You didn't ask, I said. Her hand withdrew slowly. Dad leaned back. So what now? You're rich, we're proud, and the internet thinks we're villains. Is that what you wanted? I met his gaze. No, Dad. I wanted peace, but peace doesn't always look polite. He looked away, jaw tight. Mom's voice trembled. We saw the helicopters again this morning. They were beautiful. I smiled faintly. They're just machines, Mom. What matters is the flight, not the steel. She nodded, eyes glistening. We didn't mean to hurt you. I know I said. But intent doesn't erase impact. Dad sighed. You think you're better than us now. No, I said softly. I think I finally understand you. You feared what you didn't control, and I became the proof of that fear. He stared at his hands. And what are we supposed to do with that? Learn, I said. Maybe next time when someone tells you they see something bigger, you don't laugh. You listen. The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was hollow, like an old room being aired out for the first time. Mom finally whispered, Your sister hasn't left her condo. The press keeps calling her. She says she can't go anywhere without someone recognizing her. I looked out the window. That's not my fault. I know Mom said, but she's still your sister. I turned back to her. And I was still your daughter when you called me a disappointment. Silence cuts both ways. Her face crumpled, but I didn't move. I couldn't not yet. After a long pause, Dad said quietly, You're stronger than we ever knew. No, I said. I just stopped asking for permission to exist. We sat there for another few minutes sipping coffee that had gone cold. No apologies came, no grand reconciliations, just acknowledgement, and that was enough for now. When I stood to leave, Mom reached for my hand. Can we see you again? Maybe I said. When it's not about guilt. I walked out into the wind, the river glittering under the gray sky. Somewhere behind me, I knew they were watching two people who had built their comfort on my silence, now learning what happens when silence learns to speak. Back at headquarters, Rodriguez was waiting in the hangar. How'd it go? They're human, I said. Flawed, frightened, and finally, listening. He smiled slightly. That's progress. It's gravity, I said. It keeps even the strongest wings humble. He nodded toward the runway. Fleets refueled and ready. Where to next? I looked out at the aircraft lined like sentinels in the snow. Nowhere. Not yet. The storm's not done. That night the snow returned soft, relentless, soundless. I stood by the hangar doors watching the flakes settle over the helicopters. The headlines were still raging, the world still spinning, but in that moment everything was still. And I realized something I hadn't before. Power doesn't come from control. It comes from calm. Outside, the storm kept falling silent and endless. Inside, I finally learned how to stand in it without flinching. By Monday morning, the world had turned the story into a spectacle. Reporters camped outside Aeronova's Denver headquarters, drones circled the hangar perimeter, and every major outlet ran some variation of the same headline, The Billionaire Daughter Who Outsmarted Her Family. I arrived through the back gate, escorted by 2 security vehicles. Inside the control tower, everything was calm, too calm. My assistant Mara met me with a tablet and a look that said trouble was waiting. Morning, Ms. Ward, she said, matching my stride. You'll want to see this. She pulled up a feed of breaking news. My sister's face filled the screen, puffy from crying, but perfectly lit. We're not bad people, Emma was saying, voice trembling just enough to look genuine. My sister humiliated us publicly. She could have talked to us, but she wanted revenge. I froze for a second. The word stung not because it was true, but because of how easily the world would believe it. Turn it off, I said. Mara hesitated. There's more. I said, turn it off. She obeyed, screen going dark. For a long moment I stared at the blank display. Then I laughed quietly, shaking my head. Of course. The victim rebrands herself as the martyr. Classic PR play. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. Saw the interview. Just enough, I said. He stepped inside, arms crossed. They're trying to flip the narrative. Paint you as cold, vindictive. I am neither, I said. But perception feeds on simplicity, and simplicity always wins before the truth gets its turn. He studied me. Do you want me to respond to the press? No, I said. Let them talk. The truth doesn't panic. I've survived worse storms than this one. But I could feel the tension building, the air in the tower thickening. For the first time since the reveal, I realized how fragile public favor could be. Yesterday, I was the woman who outwitted her family. Today, I was the ruthless billionaire who humiliated them. The elevator chimed. Jonas, my COO, strode in, phone in hand. "We've got an issue," he said. "A supplier in Singapore just froze our shipment. They're citing concerns about reputational exposure." "Exposure," I repeated. "We deliver government contracts faster than anyone in the industry." "Doesn't matter," he said grimly. "Optics do. They don't want their name tied to a family feud trending online." The words hit harder than I expected. For years, I'd built everything on precision, integrity, silence. Now, because of one viral moment, people were questioning the foundation. How bad, I asked. 3 shipments on hold. A few others asking for reassurances. I exhaled slowly. "Fine. We'll handle it." Rodriguez frowned. "How?" "By reminding them who we are," I said. "Schedule a global press conference. 2 hours. Jonas hesitated. "You're sure? You've always avoided the spotlight." "Maybe it's time I stop hiding," I said. "If they want a story, I'll give them one worth remembering." 2 hours later, I stood in front of a sea of cameras and microphones in the Aeronova lobby. The walls of glass behind me framed the fleet beyond rows of helicopters glinting under the floodlights like silent proof. The reporters erupted as soon as I stepped up to the podium. "Ms. Ward, is it true you publicly humiliated your family? Do you regret your actions? Are you using your company to send a message of revenge?" I raised my hand. The noise softened. "Let's start with the truth," I said, voice steady. 8 years ago, I was dismissed by people who believed my dreams were too big. I built Aeronova from one leased helicopter to a $2 billion network spanning 14 countries. Every flight we take saves lives, connects people, and delivers aid where it's needed most. What happened last week wasn't revenge, it was revelation. You don't need to destroy someone to remind them who you are. The room went quiet. I could feel the shift, the hesitation between curiosity and respect. A reporter near the front called out, "So you're saying the landing was symbolic?" "It was practical," I said. "It proved what I built is real. Sometimes the only way to end disbelief is with undeniable evidence." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked. Another voice shouted, "Do you plan to reconcile with your family?" I met the question head on. Reconciliation requires truth on both sides. I've made mine visible. Jonas, standing off to the side, gave me a subtle nod. The narrative was turning. I closed with one line that wasn't rehearsed. Now I own the sky. Not for vengeance, but for freedom. Remember that next time you underestimate quiet ambition. The flashbulbs exploded. Hours later, back in my office, the first reactions started to roll in. News anchors praised the speech. Investors reaffirmed confidence. Even the supplier in Singapore unfroze their contracts. Mara knocked and entered holding a fresh report. "You did it," she said. "The tide's turning." I looked at her, exhausted but calm. "It's not victory," I said. "It's balanced." She smiled. "That's the same thing, isn't it?" "Not quite," I said. "Victory ends something. Balance lets you breathe." When she left, I turned to the window. The fleet was still illuminated outside, unmoved by gossip, untouched by the world's noise. Machines didn't care about reputation. They only cared about lift-thrust gravity and timing. My phone buzzed on the desk. A message from an unknown number. "You looked powerful up there, but power has a price. E." I stared at the screen. "My sister." I typed back one line, "Everything worth flying for does." Then I set the phone down, leaned back in my chair, and closed my eyes. Outside, thunder rolled across the Rockies, low and distant. The sky was changing again, dark electric, alive. And I knew the storm wasn't over. It was just beginning to understand who it was dealing with. The storm hit at dawn. It wasn't the weather kind. It was digital. By 6 a.m., Aeronova's cybersecurity team was flooding my phone with alerts. Unauthorized access attempts, foreign IPs, a breach in one of our satellite-linked networks. Someone wasn't just angry. Someone was coming for blood. I was in the hangar when Rodriguez found me, his expression sharp. We've got movement on the east firewall. Someone's probing deep. Not amateurs either. How deep, I asked. Corporate architecture. They're going after proprietary logistics data, flight schedules, client contracts, maybe even personal correspondence. Lock it down, I said. He was already on his headset barking orders to the IT division. The hum of the helicopters outside mixed with the rising pulse of controlled chaos. Jonas arrived moments later looking grim. We traced the breach. It's coming from a private server farm registered to your sister's fiancé. I blinked once. You're sure positive? He runs a small analytics firm. Probably thought he could scrub his trail, but he's sloppy. The air went still. Rodriguez muttered, "Revenge comes in many disguises." Not revenge, I said quietly. Fear. I nodded, struggling to keep my voice even. It wasn't a shock. Just a cold, heavy sadness settling over me. Emma hadn't done this directly, but it was driven by the fear and jealousy she'd cultivated. This was no longer a battle of proof. It was the wreckage of a family. But I couldn't back down now. I walked to the glass wall overlooking the tarmac. Snow was still falling, a deceptive calm. They're trying to damage what they can't control. Same pattern, same blindness. Jonas leaned on the console. We can go public, make an example. No, I said. We handle it quietly. I won't make this a circus. Rodriguez frowned. Ma'am, if they keep digging, they won't. I turned to him. Because I'll give them what they're looking for. He stared at me like I'd lost it. You're going to give them access to what I want them to see, I said. Let them find a door. But that door leads exactly where I want it to. Within an hour, my tech division had built a mirrored server, a labyrinth of false data polished enough to look real, but laced with signatures that traced every keystroke. By noon, the trap was set. They're inside, Jonas said. Following a false project file. Good, I said. Let them read. The false file detailed a fictional project called Aero Nova Sky Sovereign, a supposed military-grade fleet expansion program with encrypted client deals across international borders. It was bait so irresistible that anyone ambitious enough to steal would choke on it. At 12:47 p.m., the first trace came through. The connection cracked open like an egg. My sister's fiancé's credentials were stamped all over it. Jonas whistled low. They didn't even try to hide their arrogance. People rarely do when they think they're smarter than you, I said. Rodriguez crossed his arms. What do we do with it? Nothing, I said. Not yet. Let it burn slow. That evening I took the elevator to my private office on the top floor. The city stretched beneath me, its arteries glowing with winter light. I poured a glass of water, watching condensation beat along the rim. The reflection staring back at me looked composed, but my pulse said otherwise. They'd underestimated the cost of trying to break me. By the time I sat down at my desk, my assistant Mara had already forwarded the evening reports. The data leak's spreading, she said through the intercom. But it's all decoy. No one's questioned authenticity yet. Perfect, I said. Also, she added, there's a message waiting, from Emma. I paused. Read it. She says, and I quote, "You've ruined our lives. If you had any decency, you'd stop." I took a slow breath. Reply with 2 words. Which one's noted? Understood. Silence on the other end. Then softly. You really want to send that, yes. Sometimes the quietest words make the loudest echoes. When I hung up the phone, buzzed again this time, an internal alert. The fake data was being disseminated. Every cybersecurity agency that touched it would see one thing, a fraudulent file uploaded from my sister's fiancé's firm, not from Aero Nova. At midnight, the news broke. The same channels that had once glorified Emma's tears now ran a new story. Leaked documents expose unauthorized corporate espionage attempt against Aero Nova. Rodriguez stormed into my office, half grinning, half shocked. You planned this? Of course, I said. Revenge is a reaction. Precision is art. He laughed quietly. You're terrifying, ma'am. Only to the ones who mistake kindness for weakness, I said. The fallout came quickly. Federal agencies opened investigations. Contracts were pulled from Emma's fiancé's firm. By sunrise, their company website was offline. Jonas dropped a folder on my desk that morning. Damage report on their side. I flipped it open. Frozen assets, revoked partnerships, 2 resignations. Justice doesn't always need a courtroom, I murmured. He studied me carefully. You didn't enjoy this. I met his gaze. No. But I needed it. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft mechanical hum of the building, the rhythm of systems working as designed. Outside, dawn broke like glass, the first rays spilling across the hangar and the frozen tarmac. Rodriguez approached from the doorway. The fleet's ready for inspection. What's next? I stood slipping on my coat. Next, I said, glancing toward the horizon. We keep flying. Let them watch. Let them learn what flight really costs. He gave a short nod. Understood. As I walked through the hangar, technicians and engineers paused to greet me. The machine stood gleaming in formation engines, humming faintly, waiting for command. I ran my fingers along the fuselage of the lead aircraft, feeling the chill of the metal beneath my glove. The world would keep spinning, gossiping, rewriting the narrative. But the sky didn't care, and neither did I, because somewhere between control and chaos, I'd found clarity, the kind that doesn't roar, doesn't beg, doesn't apologize. The kind that knows the storm may come again, but this time I was the thunder. The silence after victory is its own kind of noise. It hums beneath the surface, louder than applause, heavier than triumph. For the first time in years, Aero Nova's name was on every front page. But this time, not as scandal, not as curiosity. We were untouchable. And yet beneath that stillness, I felt something shifting. The higher you climb, the thinner the air becomes. Power doesn't crush you from the outside, it starves you from within. Rodriguez found me in the observation deck late one night. Below, the fleet shimmered under floodlights, engines' dormant wings resting. You haven't gone home in 3 days, he said. Home is relative, I replied, eyes fixed on the tarmac. He leaned against the railing beside me. The board's ecstatic. The market's stabilized. The press is calling your strategy a masterclass in counterintelligence. Good, I said. Then they can run the company for a while. He glanced sideways. You don't sound like someone who just won. I smiled faintly. Winning was never the goal. Balance was. But balance demands stillness, and I don't remember how to stand still anymore. He said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly, You ever think about what comes after all this? I looked at him, surprised by the question. After what? The empire, he said. The noise, the proof, the constant motion. What happens when you've already outrun everyone who ever doubted you? The question lingered. The truth was, I didn't know. Instead, I deflected. The sky doesn't stop being sky just because you've flown through it. Rodriguez smirked. Maybe. But even the best pilots need to land sometimes. I turned back to the glass. Not yet. Below us, a ground engineer flicked off the last of the floodlights, leaving the hangar in half-darkness. The aircraft became silhouettes, ghosts of my ambition. Captain, I said quietly. How long have you been flying? 21 years, he said. And why do you still do it? He thought for a moment. Because when I'm in the air, the noise below doesn't matter. Up there, it's just truth and gravity. I nodded slowly. Exactly. That night, sleep didn't come easily. The phone wouldn't stop vibrating, messages from journalists, congratulatory texts from investors, even a few apologies from people who once dismissed me. But one message caught my eye. It was from Emma. They took everything from us. You made sure of it. Are you proud now? I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. No, I'm awake now. When I set the phone down, Emma's message still lingered. No more anger, only tiredness and a faint regret. I realized that the greatest victory wasn't flying the highest, but finding a place to land. Perhaps it was time to find my way back to the ground. The next morning, Mara walked into my office with a worried look. Ma'am, there's someone here to see you. Who? She hesitated. Your father. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Here? She nodded. He said he wouldn't leave until he spoke to you. Send him in. He entered quietly, older somehow. The arrogance I remembered was gone, replaced by a weariness I didn't recognize. Elena, he said. Dad. He stood in the middle of the office, hands clasped in front of him, taking it all in: the glass walls, the view of the city, the quiet power humming through every surface. I've been reading, he said finally, about what you built, what you've done. And it's unbelievable. It's real, I said. He nodded. Your mother's worried about you. I'm fine. Are you? His voice softened. Because you sound like someone who's still fighting ghosts. I looked away. Maybe I am. He took a step closer. You've won, Elena. Everyone knows it. But you keep acting like you still have something to prove. I didn't respond. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I came here to say something, not as your father, but as a man who finally understands. I turned to face him. You were right, he said. About everything. About how small we made you feel. About how wrong we were to confuse silence with failure. The words hit harder than I expected. They didn't erase anything, but they loosened something inside me. He looked down at the floor, ashamed. I used to tell myself I was protecting you, that I was keeping you grounded. But what I was really doing was clipping your wings because I was afraid you'd fly too far away to need me. My throat tightened. And now, he smiled sadly, now I realize you didn't need permission to fly. You just needed space. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, Come home for Christmas. Your mom won't stop asking. I hesitated. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Maybe none of us are, he said. But it's snowing again, and for once I'd like to see my daughter land without an audience. He turned to leave but paused at the door. By the way he added those helicopters, they were beautiful. When he was gone, I stood there for a long time, staring at the door. Rodriguez entered a few minutes later. Everything okay? I nodded slowly. For the first time, maybe it will be. He smiled. Where to? Next, ma'am. I looked out at the sky. Faint sunlight breaking through the clouds. Home, Captain. Just this once. Later that evening, as the fleet prepared for takeoff, I watched from the runway, wind slicing across my face. For years, I'd chased altitude like it could save me. Now I understand the truth: altitude isn't escape. It's perspective. Rodriguez's voice came through my headset. Ready when you are. I smiled. Let's go. The rotors roared to life, lifting us into the fading light. The horizon stretched wide and endless, painted in gold and gray, and somewhere below, beneath the clouds, a house waited, a small place where it had all begun. The sky didn't resist this time. It carried me gently home. The snow had turned the old neighborhood into something almost sacred. Every rooftop glistened under a layer of white, every tree bowed under the quiet weight of winter. As the helicopter descended toward the clearing behind my parents' house, I saw familiar landmarks blur beneath the rotor wash, the fence my father and I built one summer, the maple tree that used to scrape my bedroom window. Rodriguez's voice came through the headset. The landing zone is clear, ma'am. Copy that, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. When the skids touched down, I exhaled. The past, it seemed, had its own gravity. I stepped out into the wind boots, sinking into the snow. The air smelled like pine and nostalgia. Mom was waiting at the back door, bundled in her coat, a scarf wrapped twice around her neck. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then she smiled a small, trembling smile and opened her arms. Welcome home, sweetheart. I hesitated, then crossed the yard. Her embrace was warm, familiar, fragile. For a second, I wasn't a CEO or a story or a scandal. I was just a daughter who'd stayed away too long. Inside the house was almost exactly as I remembered. The same photos lined the hallway, though now they felt like artifacts. The scent of cinnamon and roasted turkey filled the air. Christmas lights blinked faintly in the living room window. You didn't have to cook, I said softly. Mom laughed. Of course I did. It's what I know how to do. Dad appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, hands shoved in his pockets. Traffic's light when you fly, huh? Depends on the altitude, I said. He chuckled, a sound I hadn't heard from him in years. Still sharp. We sat down at the dining table. The turkey steamed between us, flanked by dishes that belonged to another era. Everything looked smaller, like time had shrunk it. For a while, we just ate. No small talk, no tension. Just the sound of silverware and the occasional sigh. Finally, Dad set down his fork. You did good, Elena. I looked up. I did what I had to. He nodded slowly. Yeah, you did. I saw the interviews. The way you handled those reporters. Hell, I would have lost my temper. You used to tell me I was too quiet, I said. He smiled faintly. Turns out, silence can be louder than yelling. Mom reached across the table, her eyes glistening. We're proud of you, honey. I know we haven't said it enough. Maybe not ever. I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. Then she added softly, we didn't know how to love a daughter who didn't need us. That cracked something inside me. I looked at her, really looked at her, the lines that had deepened since I'd left the weariness that came from years of misunderstanding. You always loved me, I said. You just didn't recognize the version I became. She smiled through her tears. And now? Now, I said, I think we're learning. The wind rattled the windows, and for a moment we all sat there listening to it, 3 people who'd finally stopped trying to win the same argument. After dinner, Dad poured coffee while Mom cleared the table. He handed me a mug and sat down across from me. You know, he said, I watched that footage again the night you landed here. 3 helicopters. Snowstorm. It looked like something out of a movie. I smiled. It wasn't meant to be a show. He shook his head. No, I get it now. It wasn't about showing off. It was about showing up. The words lingered. Outside, the snow had thickened again, flakes drifting slow and heavy. The world beyond the windows was all white and silent. Mom came back into the room carrying an old box. I found this in the attic, she said. Thought you might want it. I opened it carefully. Inside were pieces of my old life school photos, flight manuals, sketches of aircraft designs I'd drawn as a teenager. At the very bottom was the wooden helicopter model my father had carved years ago, the one I'd kept on my desk at Aeronova. You kept the plans, I said softly. Mom smiled. We never threw them away. We just didn't understand what they were. I held the model in my hands, tracing its edges. This is where it started. Dad nodded. And now look where it went. We sat in silence again, the good kind this time, the kind that holds gratitude instead of resentment. When it was time to leave, Mom walked me to the door. The snow was knee-deep now, the world reduced to shades of white and gray. Will we see you again before New Year's? She asked. I hesitated. Maybe. But if not, you'll see me in the sky. She laughed softly. Always looking up. Always, I said. Rodriguez was waiting near the helicopter, bundled against the cold. As I climbed aboard, I looked back at the house one last time, the light glowing through the kitchen window, 2 silhouettes standing close together. Ready, ma'am? Rodriguez asked. I nodded. Let's go. The rotors whirred to life, snow spiraling upward. The house grew smaller below, but the warmth of it lingered. As we ascended through the clouds, I closed my eyes and let the vibration hum through me. For once, I wasn't running or proving. I was simply moving free, steady, at peace. Destination? Rodriguez asked through the headset. I smiled faintly. Anywhere the sky is clear, he acknowledged with a quiet laugh. Below, the town disappeared into the clouds. Ahead, the horizon opened like a promise. And for the first time since I'd built my empire, I understood what flight really meant. It wasn't an escape. It was a return. The first sunrise of the new year painted the horizon in gold. From my private helipad above Aeronova's headquarters, the city stretched beneath me like a living map, its streets glowing, its pulse steady, its noise far below the quiet hum of the engines waiting to wake. Rodriguez approached, clipboard in hand. Fleet 1 prepped and fueled, ma'am. Flight plan filed for Honolulu. The weather's clear all the way across the Pacific. Good, I said, zipping up my jacket. Let's make it a clean lift. He paused, studying me. Are you sure you want to go alone this time? Yes, I said. I think it's time I fly without a shadow. He nodded, understanding more than I said. We'll monitor your route. Safe travels, ma'am. As he walked away, the wind picked up, brushing against the metal skin of the aircraft. The sound reminded me of the ocean, the constant rhythm of something that's always moving but never lost. I climbed into the cockpit and rested my hand on the controls. For years, other people had flown my vision, executed my designs, turned my ambition into altitude. But this flight was mine alone. No crew, no cameras, no expectations, just sky. The engine roared to life beneath me, vibrating through the seat, through my bones. I eased the throttle forward. The world lifted. Denver fell away in slow-motion highways, turning to lines of silver rivers cutting through the city like veins. The higher I went, the smaller everything seemed. At 10,000 feet, I leveled out and set the autopilot. The hum of the rotors became a heartbeat, steady and familiar. For a while, I just watched the clouds. They weren't obstacles anymore. They were companions. Somewhere over the mountains, I thought of my parents, how small and human they had looked the last time I saw them, framed by snow and forgiveness. I thought of Emma, too. Her last message hadn't been cruel. Just 3 words, "I miss you." I hadn't answered. Not yet. Some things needed silence before they could find their meaning. The radio crackled softly. Aero Nova, control to Flight 1. Status check. This is Flight 1, I said. Altitude, 24,000 heading west. The sky's clear. Copy that. Smooth flying, Ms. Ward. I smiled. Always. The clouds broke open, revealing endless blue. It felt like freedom was made visible, pure, vast, forgiving. For the first time in months, I let myself think about what came next. Aero Nova would run fine without me for a while. Rodriguez and Jonas were capable, loyal, steady. The machine could run itself, but I was ready to rediscover what it meant to be human. Maybe I'd stay in Hawaii for a month. Maybe longer. Maybe I'd finally write the book I'd always said I'd write, the one about silence and strength and the cost of dreaming too loudly in a room full of doubters. I thought about what my father had said before I left. You don't need to prove you can fly anymore. You already did. He was right. But flying wasn't about proving anymore. It was about remembering. The sky began to shift as the sun climbed higher. Below, the Rockies stretched out in shades of gray and silver. Above, the atmosphere deepened into sapphire. The horizon curved like the edge of possibility itself. I reached for the control stick, feeling its weight. My reflection glimmered faintly in the glass, calm, composed, unafraid. 8 years ago, I'd been the woman who couldn't afford a plane ticket. Now I was the one charting new airways across continents. Not because I needed to be seen, but because I'd learned something the hard way. When the world tells you you're not enough, the most powerful thing you can do is build something that proves you were never too little, you were just too early. The headset buzzed again. Control to Flight 1, crosswinds approaching on your left. Recommend slight correction southward. I adjusted course, the aircraft responding like an extension of myself. Copy that, control. Smooth as silk. Rodriguez's voice came through, low and amused. Enjoy the view for me, ma'am. I will, I said. But the sky looks different when you've earned it. He laughed. That it does. I disconnected, silence filling the cabin again. Hours passed. The coastline appeared ahead, a ribbon of green and gold. The Pacific glimmered, endless and alive. I dipped lower, the sunlight scattering across the water. Somewhere between the clouds and the sea, I felt it, the peace I'd been chasing for years. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet, internal, absolute. The sky didn't care who I was. It didn't care about the headlines or the family drama or the empire I'd built from one leased helicopter. The sky only cared that I showed up, ready, humble, unbroken. I pulled out my phone and typed a short message to Emma. Hawaii. Week stay. No press. Just sisters. Are you coming? Seconds later, the reply came. Yes. For once, no sharp edges, no bitterness. Just a word that felt like a door opening. I smiled, adjusted my altitude, and flew on. Below, the ocean stretched forever. Above the clouds drifted apart, revealing a clear blue expanse that felt like home. The horizon was no longer something to chase. It was something to keep. As the helicopter cut across the last stretch of open water, I whispered to myself, "The sky doesn't belong to anyone." Then I corrected myself with a grin. It belongs to those who dare to take it. And with that, I pushed the throttle forward and disappeared into the light.